Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Matthew Compton, and I have the pleasure of being the director of Pikes Peak Ringers. Our concert theme this afternoon is Soundscapes. It's a program of entirely original compositions. Handbells, I think, is a young enough instrument where it's really cool to be able to focus on original ideas. It's fun to hear things that we know, but it's kind of cool to get something new. And so this whole program, you might have heard some stuff, whether from us or other groups who have played it, but hopefully there's some things that you'll have never heard before. And I can guarantee there's probably at least one thing that most of you have never heard this afternoon, now. The first piece we played is a composition called Joy by Liz Peters. I don't like the title. It's joyous, but it doesn't scream like happiness joy. But I think it has an energy that's sort of electrifying. Liz, I met her at the college ring-in in 2016, and she brought this piece to the reading session, and she says, I don't have any music theory training. I just liked how it sounded. And so did we. And so it's a piece that has been a favorite of mine for years, but it's a great opener. The next piece we're going to play is called Serenity by Kurt Meyer. Kurt is a newer composer for handbells, and I love everything that he does because he has a great sense of harmony, musicality, and especially melodic writing. His melodies get stuck in your head. So on this song, even though it's one you've never heard, you feel like you have. And so it's a delightful, gentle piece, and so this is Serenity. Soundscapes is a piece I will play later in the concert, but it made sense to use that as the title of this concert because in all of these pieces, you'll hear many different aspects of what handbells can do. This instrument is one of the most versatile in different sounds you can make with it. Alex Giebert's twin brother, Christian Giebert, finished his dissertation and his doctorate literally on the different tonal things you can do with handbells. And while in published techniques, there's only about 30 or 40 techniques, you can theoretically do about 100 different things with the instrument. You can literally, I've seen people attach clothespins to the handbells to create a sort of a cool buzzing effect. If you put paper under the bells to mallet, and creates sort of like a snare drum effect. And so there's so many different things that the instrument can do. And so you'll hear that in many different ways throughout the concert this afternoon. This next piece, Golden Gaiety, is actually written by one of Alex Giebert's former students at Concordia University, Irvine. Al Almanza is a delightful human being. I had the opportunity to meet him when I was in California earlier this year. One of the groups that he rings in, which is a alumni group of Concordia Irvine, I met him and he just has this just delightful energy about him. And Alex was telling me that every time he would tell his Concordia group, like, oh, Al is gonna write us a piece, they went, oh, Al. And that's the best way to describe him. He's just fun. He's a nice guy. And this piece, Golden Gaiety, is one of my favorite new compositions. I like to watch all these different groups perform. And this piece is just, it'll get stuck in your head. And it's happy, as the title suggests. So this is Golden Gaiety. Yeah, that's the appropriate response to that one. Nocturne in A minor is one of my most favorite handbell compositions. If you've been coming to any of the PPR concerts since I've become the director, you've heard a couple of her pieces. And Karen has a mastery of harmonic writing. She puts every note in the exact right place, and if you add a note or take anything out, the piece is not the same. She knows exactly what she's looking for, and this is, I think, one of her most iconic pieces, and a piece that sticks with you, and it's just breathtaking. A Nocturne is a night piece. It's a piece that's inspired by night. And so as I was programming this piece in the past, I found a poem by Robert Frost that I think showcases, with the energy and atmosphere of this piece. And so I'm going to read to you that poem now. It is Acquainted with the Night by Robert Frost. I have been one acquainted with the night. I have walked out in rain and back in rain. I have outwalked the furthest city light. I have looked down the saddest city lane. I have passed by the watchman on his beat and dropped my eyes, unwilling to explain. I have stood still and stopped the sound of feet when far away an interrupted cry came over houses from another street, but not to call me back or say goodbye, and further still at an unearthly height, one luminary clock against the sky proclaimed the time was neither right nor wrong. I have been one acquainted with the night. Now, on the entire opposite end of the tempo spectrum, we go from nocturne A minor to vivace. Vivace is the Italian word for fast, and this song goes fast. Brenda Austin is, I think, one of the best handbell composers and conductors we have out there. She is an electrifying conductor, and her music is exciting, and this is, I think, my favorite piece from her because it uses so many different meters and techniques, and you feel like you might recognize a tune in the middle, but then she goes off into a different direction. But Vivace is just a thrilling composition, and I keep telling Brenda she needs to write more stuff like this because it's just amazing what she can do. Handbells are a really unique instrument because, as I said earlier, it's a very young instrument. So many of our composers are still alive, which is great. And so we get to ask our friends, hey, I need a piece that's like this. Can you write something? And they'll do that. And so Brenda's one of those people who she's composed pieces for me before, but I think you'll absolutely love this piece. This is Vivace. I had the pleasure of going to Concordia University, Wisconsin for my undergrad degree, and Dr. John Benke, the composer for our next piece, was my professor in his last 2 years at Concordia before he retired. He was an allure for many students to go to Concordia, myself included. I auditioned for the music program there, and he's an incredible man. I learned so much from him. His composition, Les Cloches, has always been a piece that has stuck with me because It does what I think handbells do best, which is just ring. We have all these techniques and things like that, which are really cool, but sometimes it's nice to hear bells just ring. And le cloche actually is French for the bells. And so the piece, it's almost impressionistic, sort of like Ravel or Debussy sounding composition, but you can imagine that you're just in the midst of tower bells and the cathedrals and things like that. And so this piece, it's written in a way where you can tell that Dr. Benke was inspired by this, but also he was an organist. And so in the middle of the piece, you hear a three-part, or the middle bells are sort of like just one manual, there's one melody, and then the bass is like the pedals on the organ. And so you'll hear that in the composition writing. But this is one of my probably top 5 favorite handbell pieces, and I hope it'll be one of yours. This is Le Cloche. I will ask what are your top 5 favorite handbell pieces later. Heartscape is an original composition of mine that was commissioned by one of my ringers, Martha Wilson, in Bells of the Cascades, the group I direct in Portland, Oregon, in honor of hers and her wife's 30th anniversary. And so she wanted a piece that exemplified her love of handbells and her wife's love of a clarinet. And so she wanted a piece that was a duet between the two instruments. And so I talked to Martha about what she would like in the piece. And so she wanted lively and exciting, but also moments of where you can just feel like what a deep, loving relationship is. The compassion, the care and the tenderness that you might feel for someone that you care about deeply. So this has become one of my favorite compositions, and it's happy. And I think that's what love is meant to be. It's happy. It's tough, it's challenging. But when you find that person, it can last. And so for Martha and Chris, this is Heartscape, and we are delighted to be joined by Daryl Stevens on clarinet. So, Heartscape. At this point in the concert, we're going to move into a free will offering. Pikes Peak Ringers is a non-profit organization, and we succeed and thrive on the generosity of you, the concert attendees, both, first of all, for just coming to our concerts, which we're so grateful for, but then secondly, this is something that, unfortunately, but also fortunately, needs money to maintain. I have been here this whole week refurbishing the entire set of bells, and so we had to fundraise to get the parts for that, but everything that you see on the table needs to be maintained. Hiring musicians and venues and things like that, all of these different aspects are what help our organization thrive. And so if you are in a position to help give to the organization, anything that you give is a tax-deductible donation. And if you on the very front of the program, there's a QR code, and if you would like to scan that, if you did not bring anything, or if you would like to give later, you are more than welcome to do so. But if you are at all able to, we would really appreciate your help as an organization. Some of the things that we are actually fundraising for, but also that are coming up, if you look at the back of your program, you will see upcoming events and things that we are doing. One of them is the first weekend in June 7th and 8th. We are collaborating with Forte, which is a longtime friends of ours and multi-collaboration group. And so we are collaborating together because both Forte and Pikes Peak Ringers have been invited to play in Wichita, Kansas as part of the Handbell Musicians of America Pinnacle event. And so we are collaborating to play both of our sets together, essentially. And so you can see that also on July 10th. We will be headed out to Wichita, Kansas. Now, we are headed out to Wichita, Kansas, but we would love to come back. So anything that you're able to give to help us get back would also be appreciated. In the next year, we are also looking at doing some other additional traveling and things like that. One idea that I have had in my mind for a while is that I would love Pikes Peak Ringers and Bells of the Cascades to collaborate together. And we are in early discussions of looking to go out to Portland, Oregon to collaborate with Bells of the Cascades. And so lots of exciting things that we are looking to do. So we would appreciate any support that you have, but we greatly appreciate you just coming to our concerts. We play to an empty room week after week, so having people to hear our results is much appreciated. The next piece we are going to play, The Roar of Storms, is one we did last year, if you came to last year or 2 years ago, either way, recently. One of my ringers in Bells of the Cascades, Elisa, commissioned me to write a piece, and her request was, write something you love, which is, as a composer, is an amazing thing to hear, because commissions sometimes are incredibly particular. So when, as a composer, we get told, please just do something that you like, oh, it's a great feeling. So The Roar of Storms came from that. In handbells, there's not many pieces that are written for handbells and piano, where one instrument is the highlight. It tends to be one instrument is the highlight and the other is the accompaniment to. Frequently the piano is the nice little background sounds to the bells, essentially. But there's not a lot of concert repertoire that showcases the instruments equally. And so I set out to challenge myself to write a piece. At the time, did I play piano? No. So I wrote the piece and went, I hope this works. It kind of did, but I had a couple people take a look at it who helped refine it, and Kathy can confirm or deny the playability of it. I'll let you be the deciding factor of that. The piece is based on the writings of John Muir. He was kind of the godfather of the national parks, essentially, where he was fascinated by nature, and his writing is evocative so much where you feel like you are actually there. And so this piece is based on all sorts of different writings, which of course I don't have written down here. But the one thing that stuck out to me is The Roar of Storms is actually talking about a windstorm, where he was in his house and he heard this windstorm. He looked outside and he saw the trees, very, very tall trees, billowing in the wind. And he did what any smart person did, is went outside and climbed one of them to experience the windstorm with the trees. So, we've all done that, of course. But you'll hear throughout the piece bursts of wind and the
serenity of trees and forest. Colorado is a beautiful state. We are fully aware of that, where we exist in one of the most beautiful parts of the country. And so this piece, I think, is fitting for that. And so this is The Roar of Storms, and we are joined by Kathy Cunningham on piano. With Quiet Grace is one of my, I say this for like every piece on this list, one of my favorite pieces. But this one is, I think, one of Jason Krug's lesser known pieces. Jason is known for sort of these fast and fiery and exciting compositions, but with Quiet Grace, the title says it all. It brings it way back, and it's just gentle. It was written in memory after a young woman who passed away from cancer, I think 22 years old. It was a very aggressive and very rare form of cancer. And so the family commissioned this piece in her memory. And Jason got to know the family and asked for all sorts of information just about her. When she rang, she mostly rang F and G5, where Joan is. And then she also played flute. And so the family wanted to focus on those two aspects, F and G5 and flute. And so Jason went off and wrote this piece. And it starts out with almost a childlike innocence. It's very subdued, and then it builds with excitement as she was growing, but then eventually moves into more of the reality of the diagnosis, the challenges, and eventually, unfortunately, her passing. And you hear that. But then the last part of the piece is sort of the living in her memory and living in her joy and in her gentle nature that she had. And the very end of the piece, the whole piece is based on these two notes. On the very last chord of the piece, both those parts are not there. Honoring her with the notes surrounding it, but remembering her. So this is With Quiet Grace. every time Linda plays it. It's so good. So thank you, Linda, for being a part of that. Music is powerful, and that's one of those pieces that just gets you. Oh, I love it. This next piece feels weird now. It's out of context. We are at the end of our concert this afternoon, but it's been a joy to have you join us. If you'd like to hear it again, come to Pueblo tomorrow. We'd love to see you. We want to thank you all so much for joining us. Like I said, we rehearse week after week to ourselves, essentially. This group does it a little bit differently because I say we, but I'm a very small part of the we because I don't live here. This is one of the few ensembles that does it like this. I live in Vancouver, Washington with my partner Josh, and I'm music director at a Methodist church out there. I direct Bells of the Cascades, and this group rehearses week after week with Joan Keene at the helm, and so thank you, Joan, so much. I grew up here at First Lutheran Church. I rang bells with Joan and have a great relationship here with Pikes Peak Ringers, and so thank you for always being there. We do want to thank First Lutheran Church for not only being our host for our concert this afternoon, but also our home for rehearsals. So thank you, First Lutheran. Thank you for Marshall and Eric for being willing to let us stay. We love it. It's always a great relationship that we have. So we appreciate you all so much. Is there anyone else I'm forgetting? The borrowed bells. Yes. We borrow bells from Forte because we don't have all of the low ones. So we borrowed the A2 and the B flat 2 from them, and so. Yes, those ones. Yes. That's another thing. If you'd like us to help us get our own versions of those bells, let us know. We'll let you know how much it is. But we want to thank you so much for coming. So, Soundscapes. What does that mean? It's literally a bunch of sound. With this piece, I wrote it for a composition contest where I was grateful to win the composition contest, where I wanted to see what can you do with bells? How many different sounds can you make? A lot. If any of you have been looking over there going, why are there bowls of water on a table? You don't put bells in water. Yes, you do. It bends the pitch of the bells about a half step. And so in the middle of the piece, you'll see Joan and Tracy dip these bells in water and hit them with a mallet, and it literally bends the pitch of the bells. You can also do it where you ring the bell and put it in water, where it starts up and then goes back down. But I wanted to see how you can kind of mess with that with handbells. And so this piece has a ton of different techniques and sounds. It is safe for the bells. I promise you, the bells do not get harmed. You just wipe the bells off and it's good. I promise you. The bells will not be broken. But thank you so much for joining us. If you have any questions after the concert, feel free to come talk to myself or any of the ringers. We love talking about what we do. So thank you so much for joining us for Soundscapes, and here's Soundscapes. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next time.